And so in this story, what Jesus is objecting to is not the Sabbath, but was the fact that on the Sabbath, in this case, the Sabbath was actually an impediment to healing. He wanted the Sabbath to be a place of healing and restoration. But in this particular instance, it turned into an impediment because this good leader of the synagogue took those rules so seriously. Now, I want you to know there were rules that allowed healing on the Sabbath. But it had to be an immediate crisis where someone needed to be healed or tended to. A chronic illness, like this poor woman suffered from, was called to be done at another time. But from the perspective of Jesus, now was the time. Here was a woman, she was bent over, she needed to be restored. Basically, any time is right for healing and Sabbath. Her well-being was more important than law and doctrine. And it reminds me that very often when we cling too rigidly to rules and tradition, at times they get in the way of God's healing work right in our midst. And it makes me wonder about the need to make our worship, where healing is supposed to happen, a place of healing. After all, this story does occur in the context of worship, doesn't it? They're at the synagogue to worship. So worship is the place where most profoundly healing should be taking place. And if so, are there times when clinging to tradition, following the rules, get in the way of people being healed? And I guess I take this very seriously because I'm an Episcopalian, darn it. And I love my traditions, and I like my rubrics in the prayer book, and I get into all these things. And so it sort of draws me up short. I'm reminded that by the rule book, a person can be absolutely right. But by the law of love, they can be dead wrong. And that's the way it is. So our gospel today leaves me thinking about two things. First, it reminds me of the need for a Sabbath for all of us. Not only older folks, but younger folks. The hectic schedule that so often touches kids' lives as well as ours, does it leave space for Sabbath and rest? And it makes me think as an adult and as a parent, have I provided that reassurance to my children and other kids I know that what makes them valuable is really their standing as a child of God and not anything else they do or don't do. And second, the gospel calls us to make our worship time a place where healing can occur. Now, I think at some level, that's the big reason that most of us come to church. At some level, it's for a sense of healing or restoration. And I think the most profound way that happens is when all of us come up and gather around this table and take this bread and wine that is offered to us. This bread and wine, this meal that God and Jesus gives to us because they say, you are special. This is your table. It's God's table, and that's where you belong. It restores us. It's kind of like, wake up. You're welcome at this table because you are God's child. And every one of us here and everyone in this community and this world should know that they're welcome at God's table. That's where healing most profoundly occurs. But I want to just give you a heads up that either later in the fall or sometime in the new year at this 10:15 service, we're going to start a healing station at the time of communion in the back of the church. Right, kind of behind Ugo and near Brad. Hi guys, right over back there. And people will be invited, if they want, to go and have special prayers for healing. And let me just say a word about healing. I think all of us are on a journey of being healed. None of us is completely healed. Healing is growing constantly into who God's calling us to be. And that's a lifelong process. young and old, are always on that journey of being healed. And I don't think any of us it's never complete, in fact, until the day we die. A friend of mine puts it this way. He says, when we die into the love of God. And I'm convinced that's when we really are truly made whole. But the rest of the time, we're working at it, aren't we? Trying to be better people. It reminds me, too, that being healed just doesn't always mean that people are telling me I'm a great guy. Sometimes I need to hear a challenging word from God or from you that helps me grow. But it is all about healing here in the church. And so I hope that our church can really grow in the months and years to come to be a place of healing for people. Now, I hope it enables some of us, to stand up straight and tall. Now, I want you to know that I don't literally think that's going to happen, especially with a fake hip and a fake ankle. I'm never going to be straight and as tall as I once was. But I do mean inside. Being able to stand up inside of ourselves and remember, because we take seriously the Sabbath, that we are God's beloved child and that we are constantly called to grow more fully into that through our participation in a healing, worshiping service like this. So, my friends, there's still a little bit more time of summer to go. So if you haven't done so, I hope you take a little bit of time to rest, to relax, and simply enjoy the loving presence of God in your life. And I hope that in the months and years to come, we'll all work to make this church a place of God's healing love, and be willing to look seriously at the rules and traditions we have, and be willing to at least think, are they helping or are they not? But ultimately, growing each of us more and more into the person God's calling us to be. Have a great rest of the summer. Amen.